All right, I think we're going to make a start now. So I'd just like to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and good afternoon. Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. This is the first in our webinar series, How Will I Assess Students Remotely? So we've got 3 episodes. Today's episode is going to focus on the opportunities and challenges that are posed by paper-based assessment specifically. So the challenge that we're going to look at is how do we ensure that in a more remote setting, we're able to digitize paper-based assessments and provide good quality feedback. Just to kind of set the scene, when we talk about assessment, we're really talking about any measure that an instructor would take to get a gauge of where the student is in their learning process, in their journey, what they've mastered, what they're still struggling with. That obviously includes things like tests, quizzes, exams, but it also includes informal assessments and more formative assessments along the learning process. So what we'll talk about today is the challenges of doing this process fairly quickly and effectively in a more remote setting, and we'll offer some suggestions on how Turnitin technology can assist you. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So the session should last between 30 and 45 minutes. Everybody's muted. So if you do have any questions, please could you use the Zoom Q&A button to submit those questions and comments at any time. There will be time towards the end to answer those questions, and we'll make sure we send out answers to any questions that we're unable to address during this webinar. Its session is recorded as well, and the recording is going to be available in about 48 hours, and that will be emailed out to yourselves. So a quick run through of the agenda. Going to start with some brief introductions of myself and my colleague who's running the webinar today. We'll touch briefly on the advantages of paper-based assessment. So we're in a digital world. Why are people still using paper-based assessment? We'll also talk about the challenges of delivering paper-based assessment remotely. And then we're going to give you an introduction to Gradescope, which is technology by Turnitin that can help address some of these challenges. And we'll finish on a quick Q&A. So just to introduce myself, my name's Jamie Whitehead. I am a product success manager for Gradescope. So I work for Turnitin, and I specifically work with Gradescope. As I said, it's a solution by Turnitin that can help address some of the challenges that we're going to talk about today. My experience is previously working as an account manager within the UK with HE institutions in particular. Part of that role was understanding their challenges and strategic goals and helping them meet those with the use of technology. And I'm joined by Jason. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, my name's Jason Gibson. I'm part of what is called the Professional and Educational Services team here at Turnitin. I primarily work with institutions across Central Asia, so welcome to all of you in Kazakhstan who are joining today, which is great. And also within Eastern and Central Europe as well. So I've had a lot of experience with multiple different products, ranging from our academic integrity services through to Gradescope as well, and implementing those in various universities and educational institutes across Europe, Middle East.
Thanks, Jason.
No problem.
So the first thing we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about is really just when we think about paper-based work and paper-based assessment. What I want to do is talk a little bit about why there's still positives to doing that, even in a digital world. So think about why instructors in today's day and age do still prefer paper, and often there is a kind of valid reason to that for some assessment types. So I would say let's kick off by acknowledging that there are trusted processes that we kind of worry that we stand to lose as we do shift things entirely online in today's world. So with regards to paper-based assessment, it's a trusted and familiar workflow. You know, everybody knows how to use pen and paper. It's simple and easy. It doesn't require any technical skills. It's really flexible. So from an educator's point of view, you can offer many different question types, from multiple choice to diagrams to annotations. And this can be particularly useful in subject areas where students would need to show working out. So that could be for example, the likes of mathematics or engineering, just as an example. However, that could be across different subject areas. And really just allowing submissions on paper makes it easier for students to focus on the work at hand rather than having to worry about how to enter things like complicated annotations into a digital system. So that definitely still has its benefits and advantages, and we still see so I've worked across different UK universities, and even though a lot of universities in the UK have electronic management of assessment policies, there's still areas where there is paper-based assessments that probably will remain to be paper-based in some way, shape or form. However, while we know that paper-based work does still have its place, delivering that in today's world, which is obviously mostly remote, as I'm sure everyone's familiar with by now, this does pose a number of challenges. So what we wanted to do today was just start by briefly discussing some of those challenges, and we'll offer some suggestions and some considerations to address these, including a look at a technology that may help. So this is 3 common challenges that when speaking with institutions who are looking at delivering paper-based assessment that you would potentially come across. So we'll spend a little bit of time delving into each of these in more detail. So first one, how will I ensure my students can submit paper-based work? How will I provide consistent and timely feedback? And how will I find a system that has appropriate functionality? So firstly, when we have a look at the first challenge, often if we're thinking about paper-based work in a remote setting, so particularly in today's day and age, the first question is usually, well, how can students submit that? So the challenge really is getting that physical submission, that's a handwritten submission, to the instructor to be able to assess and to mark. So firstly, we need to be able to digitize the assessment. So there needs to be some technology that you make that assessment available to the student. We also need to consider that students have limited access to printers. So we don't necessarily want to have them having to print something out to be able to fill in. Let's think about how we can make it more flexible for them. Institutions would then need to use technology to create some sort of electronic submission point. And if you're asking students to digitize their handwritten work, often you'll ask them to create a PDF, to submit a PDF. Do students know how to do that? So there is often a mix of digital literacy skills amongst your students, and making sure that students are aware of that process is often something to consider. So a couple of recommendations here from working with institutions and colleagues internally who've done the same. We recommend administering instructions digitally via any existing tools that you use, so any VLEs or other tools. Obviously, as I said before, don't rely on students having access to printers, so think about more flexible solutions. That could be using scrap paper to complete their assessments and then submit that digitally. Provide clear instructions to students on what's expected, so make sure they understand, particularly for high stakes assessments, what's expected of them and what they should be doing to digitize their work. One of the things that you can do as well is give students PDF creation guidelines or guidance. So actually we do have internally some documentation which we could share with you that talk about best practices for doing this. And really this is so that they know exactly what they need to do to digitize their handwritten work. And I would say if you are going to be allowing students to submit handwritten work, then consider giving them a trial run. So if you've got particularly high stakes assessment or exams that you're doing, give them a trial run so they can iron out any issues with the process and they're confident and they're able to submit and it's not adding any additional stresses or pressure. And consider using new technologies, other technologies like Gradescope, which will take you through in more detail to capture that submission point online so that the student would then get a digital receipt and they would be able to submit in confidence. The second challenge that I mentioned previously is around ensuring consistent and timely feedback. So particularly with paper-based, mailing papers around, it's not quick, it's not practical, especially when you've got multiple markers in different locations. It's just not a possible scenario, really. It would take too long to be able to turn those around and get the feedback to students. And then from a consistency perspective, when you do have multiple people marking an assessment, then there's a question of consistency. So is the marking being done in a consistent way? When there's many markers and multiple markers, it could mean that there's an array of different marking styles. Some people may be more lenient, some may be more harsh. How do you ensure that level of consistency? If you do offer a flexible solution to your students and allow them to submit variable length assignments where they're just doing the working out on paper, this could be really time consuming to mark, because one student may use 1 page to answer a particular question, and another student may use 3 pages. So then you've got that paper shuffle, and marking that would be a real challenge. On top of that, if you add in extra large courses where we see hundreds and hundreds of students, it just logistically becomes a bit of a nightmare to manage. So I'd say for this particular challenge, some considerations would be definitely utilize technology and embrace the technology to manage that process, that paper distribution and marking process. Consider assigning different questions to different graders. That way there's going to be more consistency with the marking if you've got one person marking one question. And utilize and hire really good teaching assistants to help with that marking process. So make sure that you're confident with the staff that you're using to mark, to ensure a consistency of feedback and speed of that feedback as well. And the final challenge is around the systems that we have. So how will we have a system that has appropriate functionality? So for example, with paper-based assessments, like I mentioned previously, mathematics or engineering, there is often a need to be able to annotate the documents, and not all marking tools available will allow that capability. So that can be a challenge, and you need that flexibility to be able to kind of transition really easily from that paper-based marking to digital marking. I mentioned before how, consider splitting out the questions by question across the grader. Existing marking tools don't always support this. And then from a communication perspective, when graders are working remotely, that can be a challenge. So ensuring the whole kind of moderation and marking process is done fairly and with excellent communication can be challenging. And then finally, I would say the limitation that you get from doing things on paper with regards to the analytics, it means that it will be more difficult to gain insight into the student performance and what concepts students are struggling with, which assessments are working well. So some considerations here, I would say, speak with your existing team internally, with your learning technologists internally, the rest of your community as well. So this community for advice, best practice around managing what technologies to use and how to best manage this process. Consider using any free tools that you already have access to, like Teams and Slack, to help with regards to the communication. And consider trying out new technologies like Gradescope. So Gradescope by Turnitin, as I said, is a solution that can help address a lot of these challenges. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just give you a little overview of Gradescope, and then I'll hand it over to Jason to show you in more detail how this system could help address these challenges. So, as I said, we've looked at some of the challenges and ideas to address these. What we'll now do is give you an overview of Gradescope. So it's an assessment and feedback platform that modernizes the grading process by allowing the submission and grading of paper-based work really flexibly. And it also provides you with valuable insight that you just wouldn't really get if you were marking on paper. And it was actually created by PhD students at UC Berkeley who were experiencing pretty much all of these challenges that we just discussed. And being in the field that they were in, they created a solution. So they created Gradescope as a solution to these challenges that's now used by millions of users globally. So I'm going to hand you over to Jason now, who will give you a bit of a live overview and show you some practical tips on how we can address these challenges.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jamie. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen with everyone. Okay, so first and foremost, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. Really appreciate it. I know obviously everyone has very busy schedules and very new schedules with having to juggle home life and personal and work life in the same environment a lot of the time. So it is definitely appreciated. Like Jamie said, what we're going to focus on now is how we tackle those challenges that we have, in regards to paper-based assessment, what this system is actually going to do to help you basically, take care of that issue. So what I want to first show you is how we would handle what we would usually call like a templated or worksheet-based assignment. Now, this kind of assignment is something that you would probably traditionally do in classroom. Now, obviously, we are aware that some parts of the world are currently still in a, let's say, a lockdown situation, but a lot of the world is starting to move back to normal, and we are going to be going back to the classroom come August and September, if not already. So the first thing I'm going to show you would either traditionally be, where you give a student a template, and that template would look a little bit like this. So like Jamie said, how do we get paper-based assignments online, and how do we get students to interact with that work? So what we do in Gradescope is, as you can see here, we create what are called outlines on the assignment. So what I've got here is I've got a region for the name, for the ID. So if the students were in the classroom and they handed in all of their papers at the end of the session, I could then put those in the scanner and then upload that and be graded. And before we do that, all we do is we take the question sheet and we upload it into Gradescope as a PDF, which is super simple. And then we just add everything in here. So you can see I've got outlines for the questions. I've got points dedicated towards each question and sub-question. And then I can share this with the students. So when the student goes to actually upload their work in Gradescope, they would actually see this outline. So they can use, like Jamie said, one of the many available PDF editing tools. You can obviously download it, upload it to Google Drive, things like that, and edit it. And basically just draw your answer in here if you wanted to. So it's super easy. Now, if we imagine that the students have actually physically done this work and they've handed it in class, or they've emailed it to you, for example, then all you do is you just upload them as a PDF. So you say you have a batch of 20 different assignments from all of your students, or 20 different submissions. Gradescope will then pretty much tell you, okay, this student belongs to this paper, and it will find the split point. So it'll basically say, okay, this is page 1 and this is page 2 of that student. And because of character recognition technology, it will be able to assign it to the student's name that's in the roster. Super simple. So once it's done that, like you can see here, it's matched up those students. So we then don't have to go and look through those papers and say, okay, this belongs to this student. It makes that process so much easier for us. Most important thing is obviously getting to the grading part of this. Now, really good thing about Gradescope is that you can grade paper-based assessments online. So the student simply can, if they're at home and you set this assignment up, they can obviously download the PDF and then use an editing tool and then just save it and upload it. If they have a printer, they can print it off, take a picture of it with their phone, and then upload that. So super easy. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at how we grade this. Now, the really cool thing about Gradescope is that we actually grade question by question. So instead of going and grading question 1, 2, and 3 for one student and moving on to the next one, which creates all kinds of challenges for you, we grade question by question. Now, in Gradescope, within the templated environment, which we have here, I'm going to show you a different version in a little bit, we can grade in 2 different ways. So we can either grade all 20 submissions individually, even if 10 of those answers are the same, or we can actually create groups. And this will utilize the artificial intelligence enhanced grouping for the grading process. So what the system is going to do, if we identify, okay, this is a math fill in the blank question, the system will now go, okay, let's group these together. So instead of grading 20 different submissions, what we're going to do instead is we're going to grade by group. So this is super useful. Like I say, this can be something that's more useful when we're back in the classroom, but if the students do have that PDF editing capability, then it's going to be nice and easy for you. So we've got our groups. So we can see here, we've got a group with x squared. We have a group with half x squared, a group with half x squared plus c, and a couple of other groups as well. And what we're going to do is we're just going to review those groups really quickly. So we're just going to basically confirm that, yep, these are correct. This one is also correct. These are all the same. These are all the same. And so are these. Now, Gradescope sometimes might not be able to identify, if it is the same because of the way that it's written. So sometimes we might have to do a little bit of manual work just like this. So I'm just going to add this one, half x squared, to the group of half x squared. I'm going to add x squared plus c, which is on its own here, over here. Then I'm going to add this question mark, because we're probably not going to give somebody more points for a question mark than for not doing it, unless you're an incredibly fair grader. And if so, I wish you were my teacher back when I was in education. So I'm going to add that to this group. This C extra page one, we're going to leave at the moment because we're not sure what group that belongs to, because the student has obviously added another page to show their work. So now we're going to go ahead and grade the answers. I'm going to continue to grading. So if you imagine normal scenario, you've got a bunch of papers, you have 20 different submissions, you have to grade them all with pen, or best case scenario, without Gradescope, you have 20 different submissions and you can grade them online, but you still have to do 20 individually. With these kind of short answers, using this technology is going to speed up a lot of this process. So we can see here, we have 5 submissions, we've got half x squared. So we're going to add a rubric item. So these rubric items are really, really easy to use because all you have to do is basically add these as you go. So we can see that the mistake here is that there's a missing constant. And we're going to take off, let's say, we'll take off 2 points, let's be harsh. And then I can either use the keyboard and hit the number 2, or I can click on that and that will remove 2 points for me. So I've now graded 5 submissions. Next, I can hit next ungraded answer. So if you imagine you're in a class where you have, let's say, 4 different teachers all grading question 1, we don't want to then go ahead and grade a question that someone else has already graded. So by hitting next ungraded answer, let's say there's 4 of us all grading the same question, I'm now going to grade the group, in this case, that has not been graded yet or isn't being graded right at this moment. So I can either click on this or I can press Z on my keyboard, and that's going to take me to the next ungraded answer. You can see the next challenge I have is I've got a half missing. So I can add a rubric item again, and we can say there is a missing half. Now, for those of you that are familiar with LaTeX, you can use LaTeX to put that in there. So we can say frac 1. So we got a missing half. So we can write in LaTeX if we want it. And we're going to take off 1 point. I'm going to do that there, so it's nice and easy. I'm going to hit next ungraded answer. We can see that this is missing both parts of this question, so it's missing the half and missing the constant. So what we're going to do, we're going to hit number 2, I'm going to hit number 3 and combine those together. Now we have an issue. We've now graded this question, but we've managed to have all the points. But we know that there's a group of students who've actually not done anything at all. Now, if you imagine the normal scenario is that if I wanted to go ahead and then grade, change a grade, I have to flick through all the pages and manually change everyone else's score. Because I can't say, okay, missing constant, I was a little bit too harsh at the start. And then I have to go through and then change it all to, like, let's say 1. With Gradescope, if I make an adjustment, that then adjusted all of the other previous times I used this rubric for this question. The other great thing is if I'm grading with other markers who are, let's say, stricter or easier than I am, we all use the same rubric because we're all in the same question right now. So if I change the rubric, it changes it for everyone. So there's fairness and consistency for everybody. So it makes it nice and easy when it comes to grading or adjusting any grades. And if you can imagine, if this is a huge course and you had 100 students to grade, this is going to save you a bunch of time. So we're going to go next ungraded answer. And that was our 4 submissions there. So we've now graded 13 of 20. We've got 3 students that have done nothing. So we're going to add in, please attempt. And we're going to minus off all 3. Now, just to point out, we are using negative scoring right now. So you can see the rubric settings here. If I wanted to change it to positive scoring, I can do that. And I also can show you here that I've got a ceiling and a floor. So if I wanted to go from 0 points and then add points for correct things that they've done, we can do that as well. So it's completely up to you. So no attempt on that one, next ungraded answer. We have the correct answer, nice and easy. That's 1, we're not taking off any points. And then we have this see extra page. So this student didn't answer it in this box. So we can do 2 things here. We can skip along and go to the next page. And then we can see, okay, they answered it here, or we can click the all pages button and skip to that page. But we can see that the answer is correct. So we're going to grade that correct. We're going to hit next ungraded answer, and we are done. So we just graded 20 submissions within a few seconds because we actually graded them in groups, which is really, really good. Like I say, you can have multiple graders in there. You can have a huge class, and it's going to make things so much easier for you. Now, obviously, this is in a perfect world scenario where students have either a printer, they have PDF editing tools, or you're in the classroom. Right now, that isn't the case in a lot of times. So what we need to do is we need to give you another option. So what we have in Gradescope is we have what is called a variable length or a homework assignment. So if you imagine that the students, like Jamie said before, some of the students are going to be grading, uploading work where you say question 1, that could be one student uploads 1 page or a paragraph, another student uploads 5 pages. So they're not going to be writing the same amount of information. Now, obviously, we still want to make it easy to grade, and we still want to, make it easy to set up. The setup is pretty much the same. You can see there's just no boxes. Basically, we just have the questions here, and then we just add questions with the points value on the side there. So it's very, very similar. However, for a student, when they upload this work, so this is what it would look like for a student when they upload. So they select their PDF or their images that they use on their phone. So like I say, they can just write this on any paper they want. They can take pictures of it and then upload it as a PDF, nice and easy. All the student then does is they tell you where the question has been answered and on which page. So we can see here, question 1 is on this page. Question 1 is also on this page. Question 2.1 is here. And you can also see if we go down that we have question 5.1, question 5.2 on the same page. Now, why is this useful? Well, if you think about it from an examiner's perspective, so if we go ahead and submit that, if you think of this as what you do in your day-to-day job, you have to then find where that question is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grade. We can grade, once again, question by question. So if we had 20 submissions, we would grade them question by question. This time, we will be grading them individually. The reason why we wouldn't group them together is because, obviously, like we said, each answer could be significantly different. So if we go to question 1, grading is exactly the same. We can add our points in here, we can add our rubric items, and obviously, still use that dynamic rubric function, which is going to make life really easy because you can spot mistakes and add as you go. And if you notice, last time we were very descriptive in the rubrics that we used. Reason for that is because it makes it easier for us to get feedback to students. So we're not going to have to worry about writing tons of annotations, because the students will be able to see what mistakes or what things they did right based on the rubric itself. So the rubric is almost like a form of feedback. And there's another thing that does as well later down the line, which I'll show you. So grading is the same. In the other assignment that we showed you, you could also do annotations. I just wanted to show you it here, just so we have a bit more space. So we can do a couple of things. So we can do a text annotation. So we just click on, let's say here, and we can write in our annotation. So once again, you can write in LaTeX in your annotation. So if we did the same thing that we did before, we could do the question that we had earlier. So if we just write that in here. And it was x to the power of 2 plus c. And we can do it like that as well. So we can do our annotations in LaTeX as well. That's not a problem. And you can see that I can just draw a line to where that is going to be related to. I can also use a stylus. So for those of you that have touch devices, if you have things like an iPad or any kind of touch device, you can use a stylus. So you can draw on here and you can, highlight different areas. Obviously, you'll probably be a little bit better than I am with a trackpad. And then obviously we can draw boxes around stuff as well. And then we can just get rid of it nice and easy as well. So we get rid of all of this, nice and easy. So the annotations will go to the students, and then obviously they can make changes based on those annotations or just review them if it's an end of year assignment. So super, super important to have the ability to annotate, because that's exactly what we would do with pen and paper. We would be able to annotate. Now, this is where this gets really, really important. So if we go back and remember what we did with the student upload, this is page 1. The student identified that question 1 was being answered on page 1. If I then, let's go and skip to question 4.1, we then get taken to question 4.1. And we can then see by going through, once again, there are keyboard shortcuts for that as well. So we can press J and K to go through the pages. So J going backwards, K going forwards, and we can see that I can't go any further. So that is all of question 4.1 for this student is on these pages. Now, if you imagine you had to flick through pages to find these, it would take so long. And when it comes to, external verification, if you have an external examiner who has to verify the grading, this makes their life a lot easier because they know exactly which grade is related to which question. Also for the student, when the student gets their grades, so if we were to go ahead and grade all of this, then when we grade this assignment, we can then publish that to the student, and the student can see exactly, what question relates to what grade, instead of trying to figure it out, based on your handwriting or whatever. So it does make it a lot easier for the student and for everyone involved. So if we just go down, just to give you an idea of what that would look like. So we go to review grades, just to give you an example, and we can then publish the grades. If you have an LMS and it's integrated with Gradescope, so say you have Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, you would just be able to hit a button that would say publish grades to Canvas or publish grades to Moodle, and that will go through. And you can also download all of this as well. So we publish that, the student can then view it and they can see exactly what their score was, which is super useful. They can see all your annotations, they can see that rubric, and it makes it really, really easy. And you can see here that all I have to do is click compose email to students, customize email template comes up, and then that can be sent out. Super, super easy. So like I said, those actual features in regards to, being able to give feedback on your rubric comes in to play in another area. One of the biggest challenges that we see just in general is skills gaps and identifying a skills gap based on the work that the students have done. So if you have students who have got a big skills gap, they're not quite sure how to do, different things, we can identify that quite clearly. So we can see the assignment mean across this entire assignment. And what we can see at a glance here is that, okay, question 1.1, maybe that was too difficult. Question 1.2, you can see a lot of students overachieved on that question. Maybe that question worked just right. So it's given me an idea of how well my questions are actually working. And I can even see, what sort of level of knowledge students have based on different elements. So you can see I've tagged some things here. So I've tagged this as algebra and maths, this is science, this is algebra. So if I go to my tags, so show tags, I can then see that based on the actual question type or the subject matter. So it makes it nice and easy for me to identify where those skills gaps are. I can go to another layer where I can actually see this per question. So we can say, okay, on the integral, let's see where students lost points. So we can see 20% of students got nothing, 20% of students got 1 point, 45% of students got 2 points, so they dropped a point, and only 15% of students got a point. If we just graded things correct and incorrect, we wouldn't have this level of granular information, and we also wouldn't have this level of granular information. So we can see 45% of students missed a constant, 40% of students missed a half. What does that mean? I know what I have to do when I plan my future lectures or my future assignments. I have to make sure that the students know this information. I have to go back and understand what went wrong and what went right. So it's a very, very powerful tool in being able to identify those things. So it gives you an idea of, are they understanding the concepts? Are there skills gaps? And gives you an insight into the actual assessment itself. So I'm going to pass it back over to Jamie, who's going to take us through a little bit more in regards to a bit of a wrap up, and then we'll move on to some questions.
Thanks, Jason. I think we'll just move on to questions now, and then we'll just wrap up in the next few minutes. So we've seen some questions coming through. Now, just take a look at the questions. One of them was around, how do you invigilate assessments done online? So I wanted to address this one myself, but basically what we've shown you today is obviously assessments that would be done primarily at home. So they would take the work home and then fill out the work and submit it through Gradescope. At the moment, we do not have any proctoring or lockdown capabilities, but that is something that we're working on implementing. So it will give you more security if you wanted to deliver those assessments and have the students submit online. There's also a question around, can we use Gradescope if we have a Turnitin subscription? So Gradescope is an additional tool. However, I'll come on to this in a few minutes. We have made it free for instructors to use until the end of the year. So I'll talk about that in my kind of wrap-up slides. So you'll be able to use it for free until the end of the year.
Yeah, I've noticed as well, there's a few questions about different types of questions, basically. One thing I would like to stress is that Gradescope can handle pretty much any type of question. It just depends how you set the assignment up. So when you saw that template there, that was just basically a blank template. It literally could be blank. It could be an image, it could be anything. And you're basically just setting out what the questions are and what the value of the grade, the points are per question. So that could be anything. So it could be a multiple step mathematic question where you could have part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. If you noticed, we had a question 2, and we had question 2.1, question 2.2. So those 2 points aggregate together to create the overall score for question 2. So that's something I would definitely highlight. If we were to go into this even deeper, obviously, unfortunately, we don't quite have time. But yeah, it can work for any essay. So as long as, if it's handwritten, even if it's digital, you can obviously upload it if you want. But if it's handwritten, you basically create the essay based on what the questions are, and then the students to upload their work. So it can be for absolutely anything, and you can create those rubrics on any kind of scale you want. It's totally up to you.
I'll just take one more question. Appreciate there's lots that we might not get to, but we can certainly follow those up in an email. So the other question around the AI grouping algorithm. So the question is, we saw how unclassifiable responses are dealt with. How likely are false positives where an answer is classified into a group that it does not belong to? Now, just say with regards to the AI grouping, obviously this is really a functionality that you would use probably more likely when you were able to get back in person and you could collect those physical scripts. But say, like Jason said, if you administered this and a student used a PDF editor to submit, that would also be fine. In terms of that grouping, the system uses the technology to do a sort of best guess, and it'll show you, and it'll actually ask you to validate which group each answer belongs into. So there's no risk of that, of anything being in the wrong group, because you actually have to kind of manually select and confirm the group So yeah, there's no risk of false positives there. So I know we're coming up to time, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen again, just to do a quick roundup. So basically, in summary, we discussed how paper-based assessment still, has its place in a digital world, how it does pose significant challenges with regards to remote assessment, and that we've seen how Gradescope can be a potential solution. So we support paper-based assessments in multiple different formats, allowing you that flexibility across any course, any different assessment type. The examples we saw today were mainly just mathematics, but it can be across any discipline. And the rubrics allow you to be consistent, allow you to be flexible by changing those and dynamically updating those, and basically supporting multiple graders who are marking different questions. And then finally, you see those analytics that give you the insights into performance. So one of the questions was around how do we kind of get access to Gradescope? Is it included? As I mentioned before, as a company, we've made access to Gradescope free until the end of the year due to the pandemic and the situation that many instructors find themselves in, whereby they need tools to be able to continue to deliver their own assessments. So you can actually go to the Gradescope website and create a free account. Just click on create account when you go there. We also have some resources available in terms of training for new users and future webinars. There was another question that came through about additional training. Please do use those resources that we've made available. Finally, just want to say we've got 2 more episodes in the series. So the first one today was focused primarily on the paper-based assessment workflows. The next 2 are, the first one will be on digital exams and assignments, so looking at a fully online assessment workflow. And then the one after that on the 4th of August is purely on programming assignments and how we support those. So you can see a link to find more information and to sign up there. If there are any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find an email address on screen here. Any question that we've not been able to get to today, we will be able to follow up with directly. So I just want to say thanks again for everyone for their time. I hope it's been valuable to get an insight into Gradescope, and enjoy the rest of your day.